And the reason that the conservative movement was attractive to them is because it was a way of trying to conceal what they really wanted to stand up for. If what you believe in is the American nation, then you need to stand up directly for that. If what you believe in is Christianity, if what you believe in is Western civilization, then you have to stand up directly for those things, and more to the point, stand against those things that seek to destroy it. One of the things that always rang false to me about conservatives is their fundamental and intrinsic dishonesty on the question of race. Every time you heard conservatives talk about racial issues in any context, they were always lying. When George Bush was talking about Hispanics being natural conservatives, because they value the family and a lot of them are Catholic and all this sort of thing, I knew it was a blatant lie because I have extended family in Mexico and elsewhere. And Mexico is a intrinsically socialist state. 2 of the 3 major parties, and the more popular of the 2 major parties, are not just socialist parties, small s, they are capital S socialist parties that are members of the Socialist International. The majority of the Mexican voting population, 2/3 of it or more than 2/3, is to the left of the US Democratic Party. And when you look at the way that conservatives would talk about race, they'd say, well, the black family was doing fine until the Great Society and welfare destroyed it. Those are lies. The only reason that the black family was strong, relatively, and together was because they lived in fear of white retribution if they didn't live like white people. It's the same reason that Muslims in India tend to behave better and more in keeping with the majority way of life than they do anywhere else. Why? Because whenever the Muslims get a little bit out of line, the Hindus go and burn scores of them, sometimes hundreds of them. The reason that you don't see very much Muslim acting up, terror and so forth in India, in the same way that you do in Europe and in the States and so forth, is because when that happens, Hindus go out and burn the entire part of burn the entire Muslim part of town with the people in the buildings. So, unsurprisingly, they tend to behave better. Well, that's exactly what was the case with the black family. They were not permitted to behave the way that they behave now. And if they did behave the way that they behave now, there tended to be very, very unpleasant consequences of the sort that people are still being, all dramatic and pretending to be upset about. Never mind the fact that the net result was much more civilized and much better for everyone. Imagine that. Holding people accountable to standards, whether they like those standards or not, does tend to improve the overall level of behavior. So, Again, another conservative lie. Simply getting rid of the welfare state, which isn't going to happen, wouldn't be enough to convince Africans to give up the African societal model and live like a bunch of people from Northern Europe. It doesn't even make sense, not from a societal point of view, not from a social scientific point of view, not from an evolutionary point of view, not from a biblical point of view. Different people prefer to live in different ways. And the reality is that the way that Northern Europeans and Americans who are descended from Northern Europeans tend to prefer to live is not terribly natural. One interesting thing is that white children who were kidnapped by American Indians and raised by American Indians didn't want to go back to the white way of living. They really enjoyed the primitive freedom of the American Indian lifestyle. And let's face it, if you look at the people who were rioting in Minneapolis, down near my old stomping grounds around Lake and Hiawatha, did they look like they were, did they look like they weren't having fun? Most of them look like they're having a pretty good time. It's fun to burn stuff. It's fun to break things. And if you don't have much of a long time preference, why not? And so, it's very, very foolish to subscribe to any belief system that requires you to lie first and foremost to yourself. Because everybody knew it. Everybody knew it. All the people who said, I don't see color, they're full of crap. Absolutely no truth in them. They know it. And they know it because they react with anger anytime you say anything about it. And so the idea that you were ever going to turn things around by virtue of putting the right 5 people on the court, that was always a false hope.